Now they've got one.
So you're working. So you get a job with the Cyclones.
I actually went to Atlanta. I went right when I got done with the master's degree. I got hired as an intern, and then I ended up parlaying that into a full-time job with the Atlanta Knights of the International Hockey League. I was working in the Omni, which was great because WCW was just starting to really get going. This was 93, 94.
So is wrestling in the back of your head this whole time?
Yeah. It's in the back. I mean, I never stopped being a fan and a mark for it. I just was, so.
But while you're doing these jobs, are you like, I gotta sneak in, or?
I hadn't gotten there yet.
Okay.
I hadn't gotten there yet. At that point, I was like, man, I would give anything to be one of those guys.
But I'm just not big enough.
I was more along the lines of, I've taken a different path, and let me stick to this because I've worked hard. I got the master's degree. I've got a nice little job first year out of college. We were in the Omni. It was great. We were leading the league in the average attendance of 8,000 a night. The Hawks were playing there. I got to meet some guys like Mike Weber and Arn Anderson and some guys just from seeing them walk the hallways of the Omni.
But your life path you thought was going to be what? Just like eventually own a franchise?
I thought I'd be the executive vice president of a football team, hockey team, or a baseball team.
And
something
ecstatic
like that.
about that.
Ecstatic about that at the time.
Yeah.
I was ecstatic about it at the time.
All right.
Yeah. And I was there for 2 years. We won a Turner Cup, beat the Fort Wayne Comets. I got the big ring.
So where does the change happen?
I go from Atlanta. I actually take a promotion with another team in the same league to the Cincinnati Cyclones. And I go up there as the director of marketing in 95. And long story short, still a big wrestling fan, watching Raw every night. The Monday Night Wars were just starting to kick off right there, so it was really getting hot. And during the lunch break, I was listening to the radio, and a radio commercial came on for a wrestling school up in Norwood, Ohio, maybe a few miles away. I had a suit on and everything, so I said, let me go up there during my lunch. So I drove up there during my lunch. I walk in there, I see Roger Ruff, and I recognize him right away from all the
You recognize him?
I recognized him.
Not me. I wouldn't have recognized
I recognized him right away because in Richfield Coliseum, he reffed all the house show tours in Cleveland, and I would be at every one. So I remembered him right away, and we had a talk, and he gave me all the info, and I signed up right there, man. I went back to work. I was never the same. I came back I ended up getting fired from that job
really?
A year later just because I couldn't, they wanted what I couldn't give. I was missing games on Friday and Saturday night, smoozing clients to go to wrestle up in an armory in front of 50 people and loving every minute of it. And I just was addicted to it, Colt. I just couldn't get enough of it, man.
So I guess to give context to everybody, it's like there was, for you, was it just there was like that commercial? Like the idea of the smaller wrestling training was just never, like you never thought that was a thing?
I didn't foolishly. I don't know if I don't know if I ever thought there was. I guess I thought that these guys were guys that were groomed for years through big organizations, and I never realized. I didn't know anything about the independent scene. It's probably the best way to put it. I didn't know independent wrestling was big in schools and stuff like that. So when I heard that radio commercial, it was a brand new world for me. I remember I drove right up there, and I was like, let me see this thing. And it was an old beat-up building and old pictures all over the wall and a ring in the middle and a little weight room next door to it. And talking to the guy, talking to Roger, and I was never the same. I was addicted. My job performance immediately just nosedived. And
I talk about this sometimes, and like I feel, and you can talk on this too. Like I feel that some of the people now, like they just want to go to WWE, right? Like they go to these schools and they just want to go to WWE. And whereas like when you say that, it just seems like you just wanted to just be in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, so I don't know. You had this awesome job that you got fired from. Then, was your mindset like, oh, it's okay, I'm going to be in WWE or I'm going to be in whatever? Or was it just like, I'm a shitty
that's a great
now,
question, Cole. That's a great, you're bringing me down memory lane because I didn't care. I mean, my W-2, my last year in hockey was for six figures. My W-2 for the year after was poverty level. Right. I got audited for it because they were so suspicious as to how I went from making that to that. But I always, when I got in, I always thought WWE. That's when I first got in, training that first couple years, 95, 96, I was like WWE, WWF, whatever it was at the time.
So it's okay that it's poverty level because eventually...
That's what I was thinking.
Was it like an investment for you?
It was an investment for me. And not only that, man, I just loved it. it was okay that I was I was bumming off a friend, living with a friend and everything, and I knew I needed to get my stuff together, but I just loved it so much. Nothing gave me that feeling of accomplishment and inner feeling of good like I did when I'd work in front of 30 people and 50 people. I was addicted to it, and I realized that I'd given up a lot financially, but then I was like, let's go for the moon. Let's shoot for the moon here in WWE, and that honestly, for me, that changed after Puerto Rico. When I went to Puerto Rico in 2002, Dutch brought me there, and Savio, and at that point, I was like, my goal isn't WWE anymore. My goal is to be a success in this business, no matter where it's at.
Make a living.
Yeah,
and to me, especially in Puerto, like not my first, but like when I went to England for 3 months, and it was just like I was traveling the roads. And I was like, oh, this is all I'm doing. I don't have to worry about anything. This is what making a living as a wrestler is like.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit in Puerto Rico, but like I can only assume it's that same thing. It's like, oh, we're doing it.
Yeah, that was my first taste. That's a great point. That was my first taste of doing it full time.
Yeah.
That was the first, I'd done the Indies from 95 to 2002 in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, and, making nothing, obviously, and wrestling in front of very few people. And then, Puerto Rico came around, and Dutch brought me there, and it was the first time I was making a weekly salary. That was IWA. Puerto Rico was hot then. We were wrestling in front of 2,000-3,000 people every night. So that was my first taste of not only a kind of a territory feel, but it was my first taste of, like you just said, this is it. I'm doing it full time. I'm paying my bills doing it. And
I remember Bushwhacker Luke was like, wanted me to do, I chose to do a summer of England instead of Puerto Rico, but he wanted me to stay at the island a little bit. He's like, I can give you $300 a week, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds amazing!" Like,
it was, man. Me too. That when I got that first check, and I was like, "Holy smokes, man! Somebody's actually paying me a salary to do this," and it wasn't a lot of money, but it was more money I'd ever seen in the business,
especially in wrestling. Right?
Especially, this is the most money I'd ever seen in wrestling by far.
I do want to say, sorry. So when you get canned from the job, from the hockey job. Do you go get another job, or do you just do wrestling?
I'm glad you asked about this because you're not going to believe it. And this is an exclusive for your podcast.
Wonderful.
Well, I had some odd jobs, obviously, because I wasn't making any money, and I got fired from all of them. I sold the last one I sold used cars at a used car lot.
Whoa.
But the second last one, the last one, which is the one I want to give you the exclusive about, I actually sold DNA tests on an 800 number for the Maury Povich show.
What?
I was an 800. I swear to God, no one. You just reminded me by clicking on other jobs, and no one's ever really asked me about it. My last job I worked
at a call center.
DNA Diagnostic Center is actually in Cincinnati. That they do all his testing for free. And then they get the plug on the show. So they do all his DNA testing for all his guests. And in return for that, they get a big board at the end saying, if you need a DNA test, call. You'll see it at the end of the show. Call 1-800.
Yeah.
I worked for that operator center is in Cincinnati. And I worked for them. And I sold on the phone. So whenever I would get a schedule every morning saying what time the show would air all around the country, so you would know what time as soon as that billboard aired, the phones would just bling, ding, ding, everything. And I took calls like you wouldn't believe, man. Some really sad, shocking stuff. Just, husbands that have cheated on their wives and really just horrible stuff. Incest cases and just stuff that was just really hard to deal with. And I'm on the other line of the phone taking their credit card number to get a DNA test done. So that was my last job. And funny enough, that job, and that was the last job I ever had before wrestling. And what ended that was I had already had 2 strikes, and I only had 1 more left to not show. And Bob Ryder called me and said, we'd like you for the first TNA pay-per-view in Huntsville, Alabama on July 19th, 2002 for the Gauntlet for the Gold. And I never talked to Bob or nothing, but I was just, I punched a hole in the wall. I was so happy. I was like, God, they're bringing me in. I can't believe it. And it's the first pay-per-view. And so I went to them. They said, if you missed, you're done. And I was done with that.
And you were doing jobs like that because like
I didn't want to do them. I just needed money.
Right, but I'm saying, but obviously with the Masters, you could obviously get a bigger job. But you needed wrestling jobs, right?
I needed wrestling jobs. That's what it was. But if I had a great job with the hockey and everything, and I had such a great resume and the master's degree, I could have gone. I could have gotten 7 or 8 really good plush office jobs with a great salary, but my time I would have had no time. That was the whole reason I had to get out of the hockey, was because of the time. So I had to have wrestling jobs. I had to have jobs where I'd go to the car dealership and say, hey guys, I need Friday, Saturday off, and it would not.
And
be
I think it's important to have those. If you're an artist, it's important to have those types of jobs. So the shittier the job, the more you need to make it or break it in whatever art you're doing,
right?
Wrestling.
I mean, I could have taken a plush job. I had the resume and I had the master's degree and everything like that. I had several good offers, but I knew I couldn't be able to fulfill it. It would have ended up very badly the same way. I would have been released or fired. So I wanted to focus on wrestling and then find odd jobs,
right?
Selling DNA tests
to help support your wrestling habit,
just to help support my wrestling habit.
As Tracy Smothers would say.
That's
right?
exactly it.
So what came first, the Puerto Rico or the TNA, or was it?
TNA did. I went and did the first TNA pay-per-view.
And then they sent you to Puerto Rico, right?
Well, what happened was they didn't have any spots. I mean, they were inundated with WCW guys. A lot of guys that had names. I was nobody.
Kiwi. Mike Sanders, who listens, by the way. Hi.
There was a lot of guys that had a bigger name than Abyss did. I wasn't even Abyss yet, first of all.
On that first one, were you Prince Justice?
I was Prince Justice on the very first one. So long story short, they didn't have a job. They didn't have any openings. Jerry Jarrett was very gracious, and I talked to him for a while, and he just didn't have anything. So Dutch was an agent there. So Dutch was like, hey, come to Puerto Rico. You can live down there. I'll put you in a house. Victor had a house for the guys. I'll get you a weekly salary.
I'm sure it was I'm sure his eyes pierced. It was like, look, like, and I'm sure it's what you wanted, but it was like, look at this untapped, huge man who nobody knows about, right?
Dutch was, Dutch could spot talent. Dutch knows. I mean, he's been around guys throughout this business, Undertaker and Kane, and helped groom those guys a lot of ways. They'll tell you that, and he definitely groomed me. I wouldn't be anywhere without him. I mean, he brought me down there. He taught me how to be a big man. The first thing he did was, we're getting rid of this Prince Justice shit.
What was Prince Justice?
Prince Justice was a 350-pound version of Jerry Lawler. Wow. I wore a crown. I wore a cape.
I remember kind of hearing something.
Yeah,
it was Hero had told me this story.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I got 5-6 good years out of it, and it was fantastic. I could always talk, So I thought I was pretty good, and when I went to Puerto Rico, I found out I wasn't very good at all, And Dutch immediately took the name off of me. He said, you're way too big and intimidating and good and talented to be walking around in a goofy suit. He was right, totally right. And he took it off me, and he came up with the Abyss name, and I remember looking at him and going, Abyss? Dutch? I mean, are you sure?
Yeah. It's weird to do 7 years of something and then snatch.
You're right.
Of course.
But it was such a good move now, and looking back on it, like just everything he did that Puerto Rico was a 1-year grooming. I lived there on the island for a whole year straight.
Did a year.
It was a territory. I mean, we were 4 nights a week. Mm-hmm. We did a B and a B Town Thursday, or a C Town Thursday, B Town Friday, A Town Saturday TV, and a B or C on Sunday.
And how were you about okay with knowing, because a year's a long time, so I don't know what you had back here in America, but were you fine?
I was fine. I had just gotten married before I left.
Oh my God.
Well, I shouldn't say job. I got married right after 9/11, October 27th of 2001, and then I went to Puerto Rico that March.
With her?
No, without her. And she was just great. I mean, we're still married to this day. We're still married.
Woman,
yeah, she knew I wanted it. She knew it was a goal. She knew that TNA wasn't an option at the time, and I was really kind of devastated at that. And then Dutch, out of nowhere, shows up like a savior and offers this Puerto Rico thing. I was ready to quit because I was like, nothing was happening. I'd been doing it for 5-6 years already, and I was broke. Mm-hmm. So I was like, enough's enough. And then Dutch offered that.
They weren't buying DNA tests anymore.
They weren't buying DNA tests anymore.
I get it.
So I went down there for that year, and it was great, man.
Who'd you work with, or what'd you do?
I did. Well, we did the Abyss. That's where Abyss started. Abyss started in Puerto Rico before it was ever in the States, and we worked on the mask and the look, and then obviously it was fun and it was adventurous for me because it was different. I was kind of a goofy
you became a
heel,
killer.
and I had to become a killer.
Who were you working with?
Gosh, every night, man, and that's it's a real physical style. It was real physical there, man, and Apollo. Mm-hmm. Every night. 6'5", 280, rock solid. Yeah. Ricky Banderas. Shane, the glamour boy Shane, and then a lot of the Puerto Rico legends like Victor the Bodyguard, Chicky Star,